Hello everyone, my name is Tim Hansen, and today I'm going to show you how to set up a mesh network using SonicWall's Wireless Network Manager. To demonstrate this, I'm going to be using two SonicWave access points, both of which were previously set up and configured on WNM, albeit minus the part about actually being added to a mesh network. If you are starting from scratch and want to first get things configured or get your wireless network up and running, go ahead and check out my how to configure a wireless network video on my channel. All right, so let's dive right into it. And first you can see here I've got two APs in the off state. If yours are already running, that's okay, just leave them as is. This process will work the same regardless if they're on or off. To enable mesh networking, let's go ahead and head over to AP policies, and then you'll want to find the AP policy that your access points are in. Right, so the AP policy section is where we configure access point or device specific settings intended on being pushed out to multiple access points. Right, and if I open up my AP policy, of course, we've got a number of different settings, right? Bluetooth low energy, 802.1x, etc. The tab we're interested in here today is, of course, Mesh Network. Okay, so enabling Mesh Network is as simple as pulling down the drop-down menu beside Mesh Radio and then selecting the appropriate frequency. In most circumstances, you'll want to use 5 gigahertz, right? You get the benefit of faster speeds and not having to worry about channel congestion commonly seen on the 2.4 gigahertz frequency. If you don't have a good line of sight between access points in the mesh network, or there are walls or other obstructions between APs, then you may consider 2.4 gigahertz, but I would recommend trying with 5 and seeing what kind of signal strength you get between APs. First before considering 2.4. And then the RSSI setting is what's going to tell the access point what signal strength to use in order to maintain a specific decibel milliwatts, right? So it'll shift signal strength in order to maintain a good connection between APs over the air. Minus 80 decibel milliwatts is the default setting, and this represents a stable connection, so you should be able to just leave that as is. All right. And then once I save the settings, I'll want to quickly head over here under zones and just double check that my zone has the right AP policy selected. Okay. Once that's been done, I should essentially be able to power up my access points, and they'll get that configuration update applying the mesh network. Or if your access points are already up and running for you, just the same, they'll get the config update pretty much instantaneously. Now, a word of caution, if your access points are already in production, enabling mesh networking will force the access point to reboot. So maybe consider doing this after hours if you are already operating the access points in a production environment, okay? So what I'll go ahead and do now is, well, I'll power on my 231C and 231O access points here, and we'll see what happens. All right, so both my access points have been booted up, got the config update rebooted, and I can see now on the dashboard that I've got two online access points. Now, if I go over to the zones page and then mouse over these little icons here under mesh, I can see that both access points are actually showing up as mesh gateways. Why is this? Why isn't one access point the mesh gateway and the other the mesh node? The answer is actually pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Any access point that's hardwired via Ethernet cable will become a mesh gateway. Okay? It's only when we disconnect the access point from the network where we find that it suddenly reverts or converts to becoming a mesh node AP. Right? So a mesh node AP if you're not familiar with the term, is essentially an access point that receives its network or internet access over the air wirelessly from the mesh gateway AP that's hardwired into the network. So why did I leave both my access points hardwired to the network? Well, of course, in order for them to get the configuration update from WNM, they need to have internet access, right? And I can only do this initially until they're set up in a mesh network via a Ethernet cable. Okay, and this is precisely how both my two APs are connected at the moment. So once you can confirm that your access points have their configuration and have become a member of a mesh network, i.e. are showing up as online and as mesh gateways in WNM, it's at this point that you can take the intended mesh node access points and install them in their final resting place of sort. Okay? And once they're installed and powered up, they'll recognize that they're not hardwired anymore and automatically become mesh node access points. So to demonstrate this, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and power off my 231C, disconnect its Ethernet cable, and then power it back on, simulating me installing that mesh node where it needs to be installed in the environment. All right, so my 231C is powered back on, and I now have one gateway and one node AP, which is, of course, exactly what we'd expect, or at least hope to see in this configuration. Okay, and at this point, I know my mesh network is up and running and operational. And additional access points, if I had them to add to the mesh network, it would just be a simple matter of adding them into the zone that contains my AP policy, right? Making sure that on initial power up, they're hardwired to the network to get the configuration update, and confirming upon reboot that they're online and mesh gateways. Once that's done, again, you've got confirmation that the AP is functional in the mesh network and you can move it into its eventual installation location. All right, so that is pretty much it for setting up a mesh network and adding access points into the mesh network. So with that, I'll of course say thanks for watching and we'll see you next time.